There we go. Now you can be heard. Good evening. We're 1 minute from getting going. Thanks to the technology of cell phones, we get exact time. I don't have to rely on my wristwatch. We do want to start at 6:30. We got a full hour and a half. We'd like to get done by 8 o'clock. So a few are trickling in yet. Wonderful crowd. Thank you all so much for coming. You'll be hearing that again and again tonight, but you are thanked for being here. This evening, we are going to begin the northern section of the third CD debate with a few words from the chair of the 3rd Congressional District Democratic Party, William Garcia from La Crosse.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for being here tonight. We're going to have a fabulous time. I'm here to talk to you today that it is not an exaggeration that the fate of our country passes directly through Wisconsin's 3rd CD. The entire country. We know for a fact that Wisconsin is the turning point state. Biden has to win Wisconsin in order to win the presidency. How is he going to do it? He's going to turn out votes right here in the 3rd CD. This is where the votes are going to come from. 4 years ago, the 3rd CD was the deciding factor in in Biden winning Wisconsin. We're going to do it again. Then we're going to hold the Senate by doing the exact same thing for Tammy Baldwin. And that's how we're going to hold the Senate. And that's going to happen right here in the 3rd CD. Below the ticket, thanks to fair maps, we have assembly and state Senate races that are genuine races for the first time in 14 years. Those wins and us taking the majority in the assembly is going to happen here in the 3rd CD. And finally, one of these fabulous people, and they are all excellent candidates, and I want everyone to understand that before the forum. We have 3 excellent choices. It is a difficult decision. So, the worst thing about Wisconsin politics is the fact that the primary is in August. No other state has a primary this late. It means it's a 2-month sprint. So please, decide on who you like now. Support them with door knocking, support them with canvassing, support them financially right now. If you wait until the primary, it's too late to do that work. Support them now. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Phil. Thank you so much, everybody.
Boy, how do I follow that? Good evening. And welcome to the 3rd Congressional District Democratic Candidate Forum. This is a forum. This is not a debate. A forum is a place where ideas and the views on issues are put forth. A debate is a discussion of issues in which opposing arguments are put forward. This forum tonight will cover many of the issues facing us here in the 3rd CD as well as nationwide, and we will get to as many of the questions as time allows. Therefore, my questions will be brief, so to give the most time to the candidates to respond. Some of the guidelines that they are aware of that we're going to follow is opening remarks, closing remarks, and each of their individual answers are limited to 2 minutes. And they will be enforced on that time by 2 of Eau Claire County Democrats' best known timekeepers, Ann McKinley and Linda Norton, right up front here. And with that, I am going to ask that during our forum, we will refrain from any outbursts, be it applause or booing, be it cheering or any other type of noise, no placards. We are here to listen to their responses to the questions. So please try to restrain yourself. And also, most people are aware, no cell phone use during the forum. With that, we will get right into the questions. The first question dealing with infrastructure. And I didn't have my mic on. Oh, I got it on. I had it off. We are going to begin with opening statements. Thank you very much. I'm glad we have a sense of humor and we can keep relaxed. And we will start closest to me and then we'll rotate answers as we go through. So Katrina, first one.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much to Eau Claire County Democratic Party, the 3rd CD, and CBTC for hosting us. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Katrina Shankland. I'm a Democratic lawmaker running for Congress because the stakes have never been higher. We need somebody who can oust Derek Van Orden, stand up to extremism, and restore common sense to Congress and really deliver for all of us. In the state legislature, I passed 225 bipartisan bills that I've co-authored and introduced, and I did that by working with anyone and everyone who is serious about finding common sense solutions to the problems that keep people up at night. I passed laws to expand affordable health care and lower the cost of prescription drugs, strengthen clean water laws, and even enhance public education. In Congress, I'm going to help pass new laws to protect our women's freedoms to make their own decisions on abortion and stop the Republicans' national abortion ban. And I'm also going to do everything I can to protect our democracy and stop attacks on our elections and rule of law. And I'll work to grow our middle class and unions because big corporations don't need another shill in Washington. That's why I've been endorsed by 17 labor unions and a growing coalition of folks across the 3rd Congressional District, including Representative Jody Emerson, Senator Jeff Smith, former Senator Kathleen Vinehout, and former Rep. Dana Walks. I'm proud of our winning coalition and hope to earn your vote on or before August 13th, because with the stakes this high, we need a candidate with experience winning elections in tough districts and delivering results for the people of Wisconsin. So a little bit more about the serious times that require skilled and experienced leaders. We need somebody who can beat radical Derek Van Orden, who's best known for screaming at kids in the Capitol and attacking our democracy. And we need someone who's won an election before. I have outperformed the top of the ticket in every election and have won tough races in purple districts with Republicans throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars in attack ads my way. So I know what we're up against. And if you send me to Congress, I'm not just going to win this election, but I'll have the experience to get things done and the Wisconsin values you can trust.
Thank you, Katrina. Next, we will have Eric. That isn't me. Eric, your 2 minutes will start.
Am I good?
Yeah.
Good? Okay. I'm Eric Wilson. The shooting at Club Q in Colorado Springs in November of 2022 was the moment that called me to action. If we don't do something, my LGBTQ community will continue to be slaughtered. Guns are not only killing my community, but they are the #1 cause of death among kids in Wisconsin and nationally. That's why I sit before you today. I was born and raised in Western Wisconsin and went to school at UW-Madison, where I got a degree in economics and a minor in Scandinavian studies. I'm an IT project manager by trade in both healthcare and housing, and I am uniquely qualified to tackle not only the problems of today, but the problems of the future. Healthcare is personal to me, as it is to many of us in this room. At 19, I ended up having to have major reconstructive surgery on my chest due to breathing and heart issues. What was supposed to be one surgery ended up being 12 over 6 months because I got infections in both sides. I ended up with a lot of medical debt. At 19, I learned the healthcare system does not care about us and only cares about profits. This is something that destroys the lives of Americans every single day. Our for-profit healthcare system has put the world's wealthiest nation in a sick care program rather than real, actual healthcare. I'm the only one in this race fighting for Medicare for all, because I believe that everyone deserves healthcare. Let's give people something to vote for, not just against this November. I'm looking forward to sharing my positive vision with you and what I plan to do for the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And our third candidate is Rebecca Cook. Our timekeeper isn't beeping, so I'm going to assume we're ready to go. Rebecca?
Awesome. Well, thanks so much to Phil and for Eau Claire County Dems for hosting tonight. I'm Rebecca Cook. I grew up here in Eau Claire on a dairy farm raising registered Holsteins before we had to sell our cows because of the price of milk and competition with larger dairies, which is the story of so many of us throughout West Central Wisconsin. And that's a key reason why I'm stepping up to run for Congress, because we need a real voice who's going to take on the monopolies that have robbed us of our farming traditions and decimated our rural economies. But we're tough out here and we pick ourselves up. I put myself through college, returned home, and started a small business, Red's Mercantile, here in Eau Claire that I ran for 7 years before closing at the end of 2022 because the difficulty of competing with cheap foreign-made goods. I now run a hospitality business and I waitress 3 nights a week at the Good Wives while I run for Congress 7 days a week. And you don't see a lot of folks like me in DC. You see a lot of career politicians and elitists who are out of touch and radicals who want to hijack our government, like Derek Van Orden, who is more focused on climbing the career political ladder than serving his constituents. He's a bully. He yells at Senate pages. He reduces librarians to tears. He lacks the temperament to serve in Congress and does not exemplify our Wisconsin values. We need someone who is going to reinstill our faith in our democracy and not tear it down. And that's why I'm running. We deserve a representative in Congress who is a doer, someone who knows how to roll their sleeves up to get things done for Wisconsin, not start a fist fight. In addition to his decorum, his policies do not match our values. He advocates for big ag that put small farms like ours out of business. He's at one point called for a nationwide abortion ban. I'm going to deliver on kitchen table issues like increasing access to affordable quality healthcare, taking on corporations that are price gouging consumers at the gas pump and the grocery store, and I'm going to defend reproductive freedoms. I'm looking forward to working with all of you in this room to deliver for people from all across the region to restore sensible leadership to the third CD.
Thank you. And now I believe we will begin with Eric with the first question dealing with infrastructure. What are your priorities for transportation infrastructure spending in the 3rd Congressional District? And how would you support expansion of rail, bus, or even the electrification of vehicles?
Transportation is important. It's the thing that connects us, and making sure that we are expanding not only rail, and I'm excited to have friends that are already working on it. They're working to put rail from Eau Claire to the cities, which is huge. It's a connector to a big city. We need to look at how we can continue to expand rail system. Wisconsin used to have a heck of a rail system. We don't anymore, but we can. I want to make sure that we are prepared for the electrification, but that we are also advocating for the reasonability of it. We cannot transition all the way to electric in current state. We have a lot of trucks that are hauling a lot of things, and I want to make sure that our voice is shared and advocated out in Washington. There are logistic problems, and I plan on bringing my experience on how we can do that. I drive an electric car, so I understand the challenges that we have not only in the winter, that we have in the summer, that we have to have extended infrastructure. We need to also be expanding our bus system. It's making sure that people are able to get from point A to point B. You can't get to La Crosse from Eau Claire on public transportation without either going to the cities and then taking a train down, or going to Toma and taking a train up. We also need to make sure that we are expanding broadband. It's making sure that we have access to cell service. When we're driving to La Crosse from Eau Claire, we don't have cell service. It is 2024. We need to be making sure that Wisconsin is not being left behind. And I will make sure that we have a holistic plan on how we can implement these things.
Rebecca?
So the Inflation Reduction Act at the federal level was a great start in the investments that were made from an infrastructure perspective for rail, bus electrification, and there's so much more than we can do. I know the people in this room understand what it would mean to have high-speed rail connecting us from Eau Claire to the Twin Cities and beyond. And the truth is we've had those federal dollars, but had Scott Walker in the way to be able to deliver on that promise. I think it's important, as much as I can get federal dollars allocated to the 3rd Congressional District, that we're really empowering our local communities that really understand the challenges from a transportation perspective, and that we're allocating the dollars they need for the projects they're identifying to get things done. In contrast, Derek Van Orden is off the rails in Congress. He's more worried about stoking culture wars than he is in delivering on so many of these issues that are so pertinent and important to us here in this room.
Katrina.
Thank you so much. Infrastructure is a key investment that is needed not only for our quality of life, but also for our economy and our workforce. And we've seen a decline in public transit investment on the state level for years. Some of you may remember in 2011, the freezing of the regional transit authorities as one example. But as my colleague mentioned, the funding and defunding of high-speed rail, giving our hundreds of millions of dollars from federal money to other states instead of taking up the high-speed rail money, was a serious concern and issue. I support the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was the largest investment in our nation's history in transportation. There's $18 billion in bipartisan infrastructure law money specifically to electrify our school buses and to work on other electrification. And in addition, when it comes to public transit, I want to talk about equity, equitable access to public transit in small and mid-sized cities, in addition to our larger cities, because we're all connected and we need to be lifting each other up. I really support electrifying our vehicles as well. And just most recently on one of our last session days, voted for a $78 million capture of federal funds to provide electric vehicle charging transportation infrastructure in Wisconsin. And that's thanks to our federal government. So really, this is all to say we need an all hands on deck approach. Local, state, and federal. We need our locals leading on access routes, especially related to major employers and education and healthcare access points. Just as we need the state level folks to advocate for additional public transit funding to those small and mid-sized as well as large cities, and the federal government to lead on those investments, including the bipartisan infrastructure law. I specifically want to mention school buses because more than 25 million kids ride those buses and are across the country exposed to diesel fumes. So when we focus on leveraging those investments and transitioning to electric over time, not only are we supporting the economy, but we're supporting our kids' health and future as well as ours. And I think that's really important because for anyone who is an advocate for public transit, you all probably have a personal story of someone who is affected by lack of access, and I want to be a voice for equity in access.
Okay, thank you much. We will go to question number 2, and that will start with Rebecca, dealing with healthcare. What is your plan to expand medical and prescription drug coverage to those who are either underinsured or uninsured?
Healthcare is the very, very top of my platform, increasing healthcare access and affordability. And in this community, we know all too well the issues with access and our 2 large hospitals that closed, both in Chippewa Falls and here just down the street in Eau Claire. And we need to have lawmakers who are very, very tuned in at making sure that people get the healthcare access that they need and at an affordable price. I want to expand Medicare to cover vision, dental, and hearing, the very things that deteriorate as folks age. My parents are here tonight, and they go on a trip once a year down to Mexico to get their dental work done because it's cheaper to do there than it is in our own country. I want to ensure that our parents and our grandparents are being able to age with dignity. My dad has cancer and has gone in to get his first prescription drugs. This was last July that he was diagnosed, and it was a $1,300 copay for a 1-month supply and an $1,800 copay for another month's supply. We need people in Congress that are not lining their pockets with big pharma dollars and special interest dollars, but that are going to take those folks on so that we can get the healthcare access that we need at an affordable price.
Katrina?
When it comes to healthcare, I want to start by talking about abortion access, IVF, and contraception, because Republicans in Congress are intent on a national abortion ban, and they even, according to Project 2025, are interested in surveillance. We need a champion on reproductive access and freedom, and I am proud to have a 100% voting record on this issue over 12 years. I'm going to expand access to our reproductive freedoms in Congress. I also want to talk about the Medicaid reimbursement rate. Should we and would we have expanded Medicaid in Wisconsin, which I was on a bill for over 12 years? 90,000 more people would have had access to affordable health care, and we would have leveraged over $1 billion in funds. What could we have done with those $1 billion? Reinvested them into our communities, into our healthcare infrastructure, into our providers, like our oncology departments, our ERs, our behavioral health clinics. What could they have done? Their doors would have stayed open. So as a member of Congress, I'm going to take very seriously the lack of healthcare infrastructure in some communities across Wisconsin and the real threat that 30% of hospitals across the country that are listed as rural, according to the American Hospital Association, are at risk of closing. So when we talk about healthcare access and lowering the costs, I have been a leader on lowering prescription drug costs, passing 6 bills into law over 12 years to do so. I'm going to stand up to Big Pharma in Congress to make everyone's prescription drugs lower, but we also need a champion on healthcare access who has the experience to understand the significant needs, not only in investing in our healthcare infrastructure, but in leveraging existing funds to ensure our providers' doors stay open, especially as it relates to HSHS and Prevea. I think knowing that they only had to comply within a 90-day limit to warn folks locally in Chippewa Valley about the doors closing is a significant problem that we need to fix, and we need an all-of-government approach to do so. So whether it's expanding Medicaid, not only for 90,000 more people, but also to postpartum benefits, I've been a champion on that issue in Wisconsin, and I plan on doing so in Congress for all of you.
Thank you. And Eric.
The only way to make sure that everyone is covered is to have a Medicare for all system or a universal healthcare system. Everyone deserves to have healthcare. I'm the only one in this race that supports a Medicare for all system, because if we don't have our health, what do we have? Not a lot. And we shouldn't have to make the decision of, do I go get my prescriptions or do I put food on my table? Simply expanding healthcare does not solve the problem. I am the only one here that actually has professional experience within the healthcare system. I've worked for Cigna and Express Scripts, which is health insurance and pharmaceutical management benefits. I know the inside of the beast and how it is not working for us. They literally have teams in place to deny people claims that are too expensive. That is the problem with our healthcare system. That is what I can address.
Thank you. I'm being very technologically inclined here to rotate the cameras around. But our next question on climate, we will start with Katrina, and the question is, what legislative priorities would you support to address the threat of global warming to our climate?
Climate change is a significant threat to our everyday life, and I'm proud to have a 100% lifetime voting record and score with the Wisconsin conservation voters, who are a leader on climate change and tackling climate and clean energy. Prior to my career in the state legislature, I actually was a training network coordinator for a 6-state network of solar trainers in the Midwest. And I'm really proud of my work to scale up renewable energy. It's why Governor Evers made me the only legislator he appointed to the Green Ribbon Commission, which is charged with standing up an environmental innovation fund similar to a green bank. Why did he do this? Because for the last decade, I've had a bill to create a clean energy accelerator or green bank like other states have. I know that we have to jumpstart our investments in clean energy and energy efficiency, as well as water quality. It's all connected. The Inflation Reduction Act was the best possible bill to pass in terms of moving climate goals forward and reducing net zero emissions by 2050. But what I want to do as a member of Congress is ensure that low to middle income folks who don't have the capital up front to purchase an electric vehicle or hybrid vehicle or insulation for windows, to have them have access to that working capital on the front end, rewarding states who provide support to climate initiatives like the Environmental Innovation Fund. So I plan to be a leader on that in Congress because I think the Inflation Reduction Act was a great start, and we have even more to do to ensure that everyone can leverage the benefits. We can have free energy assessments right now, but many people won't be able to afford the rest of the recommendations on their list. And if we want to get to net zero carbon emissions, we have to do more to ensure people can scale up on those investments within their own homes while also holding corporations and polluters accountable. And I think that's really important too, because when it comes time to have this conversation in Congress, there will be people who won't be brave enough to say those words. And I've taken a no corporate PAC pledge to not only crack down on corporate PAC money, but to say they won't have any influence over me.
And Eric?
The recent Chevron Supreme Court decision is a disaster. We urgently need to pass new environmental protections. I am the only candidate here that supports the Green New Deal. I support this because half-assing it isn't going to save us. Climate is our single biggest crisis. If we don't have a world to live in, the rest of this doesn't really matter. And quite frankly, we have the most beautiful district in the nation. And I want to make sure that future generations can enjoy it like we have. It's protecting our water. It's protecting our farming land. We are a climate refugee state. We all know it because it's amazing here. But people from the coast will be moving to Wisconsin, and we are not ready. We talked a little bit about infrastructure. We do not have the capacity for people to move here. I want to make sure that we are aggressively attacking that. It's making sure that we are updating our housing, updating our infrastructure, making sure that we are putting solar panels on anything that we can, making sure that we're expanding our electric grid to carry the capacity of that influx. We can do this if we all work together. We have to do this, is the reality of it. And so I want to make sure that we are attacking this as aggressively as we can so that we can all have a place to live here in Wisconsin and that we can actually afford to live here in Wisconsin.
And Rebecca?
I will echo Eric's sentiments that this is one of the most beautiful districts in the entire country. And I like to talk about the environment like I like to talk about politics locally, right? And I think about the issues that are facing this district in particular with PFAS in our water wells, both here in Eau Claire and La Crosse and in smaller municipalities throughout the third. In Congress, I want to direct federal funds for more research, testing, and remediation to extinguish this issue that we have to have safe drinking water throughout our communities. I want to work with our rural electric cooperatives throughout the third as they're moving away from our reliance on fossil fuels and doing that in a reliable way to keep our grid reliable, and expanding tax credits that we received from the IRA that is allowing some of those rural electric cooperatives to be able to invest in the green energy infrastructure that we need in order to make that transition. And finally, we need buy-in from folks. We need buy-in from rural stakeholders and from folks in our urban areas. I'm a big proponent of agrivoltaics. Both Senator Chuck Grassley and Senator Tammy Baldwin have a bipartisan bill that they've put forth that encourages, trying to use solar panels and mixing that in with livestock and mixing that in with growing crops. And so you're creating buy-in with rural communities in the places in which we're trying to put a lot of these projects. Everybody's got to be on board in order to meet these goals that the administration has set. And Derek Van Orden is a part of a faction of Congress that doesn't believe in science, and he's got to go.
Okay, thank you. Our next question will begin with Eric, and it deals with labor unions. How would you support the revitalization of labor unions? Should public works be paid for with tax dollars and be done with union labor?
I would start by passing the PRO Act. We need to protect the right to join a union. Paid sick leave and family leave are a necessity for people. We are people, we are not machines. And we need to make sure that we are pushing back against corporate greed. Unions help us do this. We need to advocate for and implement a wealth tax, and we need to close corporate loopholes. We need to make sure that we are able to stand together and corporations are held accountable. We're seeing it with Amazon, and workers are literally dying because they are not allowing them to have water. That's unacceptable. I actually would not be able to work as an openly gay man if it weren't for unions being strong advocates for the human rights movement. And so I owe a lot to unions, and I want to make sure that we are continuing to support them. My dad was in the teachers union. One of my supporters, Al, was in the teachers union. They fought for generations to make sure that we can all retire with dignity. That's what we are fighting for, and that's what will revitalize unions. As someone that knows what it's like to be alone, I will fight to make sure that everyone can stand together.
Becca?
I grew up in a union family. My brother is a union firefighter down in Madison, and my sister works for the Teachers Union, Education Minnesota. And one of my top priorities throughout this campaign and the last, like Eric, is to get the PRO Act passed and undo the work that Scott Walker and his cronies did with Act 10. And you know that Derek Van Orden is line in step with those kinds of priorities. To the question, should public works paid with tax dollars be done by union labor? The answer is yes. And I want to make sure that every federal project that comes to my district has a project labor agreement attached to it. I've proudly been endorsed by CWA, APWU, OPEIU, and I've also received support from Teamsters. And I think we need people with working class backgrounds that are really going to advocate for working families in Congress. And so this is something that I've been committed to both in running this cycle and last cycle, and I'm going to be a champion for when I get out to DC.
And Katrina?
Prior to being an elected official, I was an organizer, and I got my start in politics because I was working at a renewable energy nonprofit and Act 10 happened. My parents were public school teachers at the time, and I'm really proud of them and the incredible work they've done for their community. And I saw firsthand how it hit them and their pocketbooks, but also their collective bargaining rights. So I was one of the people who stood with many of you at the Capitol and asked for them back. And I'm very proud to be an elected official who's introduced bills to restore collective bargaining rights, repeal Act 10, restore right to work, restore prevailing wage laws in Wisconsin, and allow for project labor agreements again. Because of my leadership on not only organized labor, but supporting workers, I have the backing of 17 different labor unions, from bricklayers and plumbers to electricians and firefighters to our two major teachers unions in Wisconsin. And it's because of my record of service and my experience leading the charge on restoring workers' rights. I'm going to not only support the PRO Act in Congress, but I'm also going to support the Public Service Freedom to Negotiate Act, which would allow for collective bargaining rights in other states like Wisconsin, because we don't just need to prohibit states with right to work policies, but we also need to enact collective bargaining rights. Act 10, the most recent decision from the Dane County Circuit Court, was a great first step, and I'm very excited that they're looking at repealing it and that it's likely to, but we need leaders with experience to deliver on these key issues because workers are struggling. Corporations are delivering record profits, but those certainly aren't creating record wages. And so that's why I've stood with Teamsters at Liney's in Chippewa Falls to the UAW in Hudson when they were on strike. I'm not just a lawmaker who gets things done. When push comes to shove and workers' rights are on the line, I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with all of you because I'm one of you. It's how I got my start in public service, and it's certainly why I'm running to go to Washington to not only defend our rights, but to expand workers' rights and ensure that everyone has a fair shot.
Okay, thank you. Our next question will begin with Rebecca, and it deals with firearms.
So we,
How do we address, good, I'm not the only one. How do we address gun safety and responsibility issues? Should we establish guidelines for purchasing guns? What other policies would you support?
So we have a deep tradition of hunting and gamesmanship in Wisconsin. I have been to a deer camp or two and fired a gun before, but AR-15s have no place at a deer camp. And I support the ban of AR-15s. I support common sense gun laws like universal background checks and enforcing universal background checks. And most gun owners that you talk to throughout Wisconsin feel the same way. I want everybody that has a firearm to be as safe as the owners that have them right now. I also want to enforce red flag laws that ensure that that guns aren't put into the hands of anybody that might be a harm to themselves or others. And when those red flag laws go up, it ensures that more people are protected.
Katrina?
Everyone deserves to feel safe in their homes, their churches and places of worship, at their businesses and schools, out in public at a political rally. And I think that it's important that we come together on this issue. That's why, as a lawmaker, I've co-sponsored a number of bills to really crack down on getting illegal guns off our streets and out of the hands of violent criminals. So here are just a few of them. Whether it's enacting violent history checks and closing the gun show loophole, or creating and closing the domestic abuser or boyfriend loophole, banning bump stocks, which has been in the news lately because of the travesty of a Supreme Court decision that actually undid a ban on bump stocks, enforcing red flag laws and enacting them in states that don't have them, and cracking down on straw purchasing, which is when one person purchases a gun for another person who's not allowed to own a firearm. And I think all of these things are important. I have a record that shows that I prioritize them in my time in the state legislature. There's a bipartisan bump stock bill in Congress that needs a leader who has the persistence and tenacity to get it across the finish line, in the same way that we need someone to stand up to decisions like the Supreme Court, who were wrong to say that we shouldn't, that any kind of ban on bump stocks is not constitutional, right? So at the end of the day, here's what I want to do. I'm a hunter. I'm the co-chair of the Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus in the Capitol, and I'm a member of the Isaac Walton League. So as a rural Wisconsinite, I know what kind of conversations we can have with hunters who are responsible gun owners to actually lead on responsible gun ownership. It isn't just going to take a few votes in Congress. It's going to take thoughtful conversations in the halls of our churches and local employers and VFWs and bingo halls and local restaurants. And I'm committed to leading those efforts because I have the track record of not only working across the aisle on key issues like ending gun violence, but also funding the Office of School Safety for our kids and ensuring that kids in schools have the freedom to thrive as well.
We'll move on to Eric.
Guns are the reason that I'm in this race. It was the moment to see my community continue to be killed. We need to bring back the assault weapons ban. We also need to be talking about this issue. So I truly thank whoever submitted this question, because until now, I have been the only one talking about this issue. We need to have background checks, universal background checks. If you need one to get a job, you probably need one to buy a firearm. Our kids should not have to do active shooter drills. We are terrorizing our kids on a monthly basis. When I grew up, it was just fire drills or tornado drills. Now they are having active shooter drills. We can do better as a society. We just need people that are willing to step up and talk about it. I'm the only one that has this issue on my website because it is that important. And we need someone in Congress that will lead the way on this issue. It is very, very important to the younger generation of people. And that's how we will win in November. It's getting younger people out and talking about their experiences, and their issues. And that is where I have a strength in this race.
Okay, thank you. Our next question will begin with Katrina, and it deals with the economy. With the increasing consolidation of large corporations, small businesses and workers are finding it more and more difficult to compete. Do we need new antitrust, anti-monopoly laws to keep our economy fair, or what would you propose?
I appreciate this question because we are seeing corporate consolidation in just about every industry. And I think three really clear examples are agriculture, big tech, and healthcare. When you have two choices for healthcare and two insurers that block the other from accessing that other healthcare provider, that's a problem. In the same way that when you have a limited number of meat processors, or you have one or two choices for a technology company, not only does that harm consumers, but it drives up costs. Competition is good for the economy, and we need a fair marketplace. The FTC is really key to this. And so the FTC has, under the Biden administration, really done a better job recently in enforcing antitrust laws. But I'm open to having that conversation about what more is needed. In the meantime, I'd like to point out I followed very closely the Albertsons and Kroger proposed merger, and the Biden administration moving to block it, because that would be the largest merger of any supermarket in our nation's history. And what does that mean? Driven up food costs for people already reeling from years of inflation. And instead, we should be ensuring competition and cracking down on price gouging and fraudulent ways that consumers can that companies can sometimes defraud consumers. So here's a couple things I think the FTC should do. They're doing a good job of collaborating with the attorneys generals across the country, but they need to also seek funding and civil penalties on behalf of defrauded consumers to disincentivize corporations from going after them, in the same way that we need more staff in both the Bureau of Competition as well as the Bureau of Consumer Protection. I think it's safe to say a lot of Republican lawmakers who take a lot of corporate PAC money are leading the charge on not funding the FTC the way they need to be to truly enforce our antitrust laws. But when we get beyond that, let's talk about what else we can do to drive down costs for consumers, help working families, and ensure that everybody has a fair shot. Because right now, most people are struggling. And you won't see that in the news with the economic markers, but that's what we're hearing on the trail. And that's what I'm taking seriously as your next member of Congress.
And we'll move on to Eric.
The reality is a lot of this comes down to corporate greed. Inflation is corporate greed. It is price gouging. I'm the only one here that has an economics degree and has the ability to look at things systematically and understanding the relationships between corporations, supply, demand. We have an issue of money. Big corporations are only focused on profits. They don't care about people, and they will continue to use that money to push us out and push us down. We have to be more aggressive. The laws are there. We just need to fund the institutions to hold corporations accountable. We will always see consolidation of markets. There is economies of scale. We see it in the airline industry. We see it in the telecoms industry. We see it in big farm. It is cheaper at a bigger level. The role of government is to put a stop to that and make sure that there is competition out there. Make sure that small businesses have the ability to actually survive. And so I'll make sure that we are enforcing those laws, breaking them up, and ensuring that we have competition and not allow corporations to just continue to raise prices on the things that we need to live.
Thank you. And Rebecca.
So this question hits home to me. We are one of those farm families that was told to get big or get out, right? The hyper consolidation you've seen in the ag industry. I've ran a small business here in downtown Eau Claire. that I sold because of increased competition with cheap foreign made goods, the Amazons of the world. We've seen consolidation in all of these sectors, and we're down to four main meat processors, and those have real implications on our working families throughout Wisconsin and across this country. And so enforcing antitrust laws is something that I've talked about throughout this campaign. We have corporations that are price gouging consumers, both at the grocery store, at the gas pump, in our housing market, while they're making record profits off the backs of their workers. And we're running against somebody like Derek Van Orden, who is very happy to take special interest dollars. All of us here have taken a no corporate PAC pledge. So we're not going to let those corporations infiltrate what we're going to be doing for working families in Washington.
Thank you. Our next questions will begin with Eric's answer, and the question deals with the LGBTQ plus community.
Being part of the community,
Whoop, I'll read it. Sorry. I love it. At least they're eager to answer our questions. With the LGBTQ community facing increasing attacks, what will you do in Congress to support them and protect their rights? Eric.
Well, I'm jumping on the issue.
Yes.
Being part of the community, this is obviously important to me. What we are fighting for is just to be allowed to be humans, just be allowed to be people. And so I will make sure that we are protecting the LGBTQ community and other marginalized communities. I also support gender affirming care. Like abortion, it is a woman's body. It is their body. It is not for me to determine that. I got lucky. My parents are here tonight. They are supportive of me. But there are a lot of people out there that don't have that support at home. And so we need to make sure that we are protecting them and that they have a safe place. As I've been going around, especially to colleges, 30% of Gen Z individuals identify as non-straight. This is not just a small subset of people anymore. As I'm going around the district, it was in Stevens Point, and I had someone come up to me and say, "Thank you for running, because I can't come out to my family. I'll get cut off." And that is a scenario that is very, very relevant throughout Wisconsin. And so, unlike Derek Van Orden, who goes into libraries and screams about LGBTQ books, I will make sure that everyone has representation and that everyone can be themselves. Mental health is a huge problem within the community. And so I will also make sure that everyone has the resources that they need to work through who they are. That's how we that's how we are advocates. That's how we help marginalized communities. And that's how we help the LGBTQ community.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Excuse me. Queer folks are my friends, my neighbors, my boss, my coworkers, my campaign manager. And getting policy passed like the Equality Act is going to be a top priority of mine, ensuring that the queer community is able to be free from discrimination. This is in contrast to somebody like Derek Van Orden, who wants to work to limit freedoms in this district. I want to expand them. We all know what he's done in Prairie du Chien, tearing down a Pride book display and lashing out at a young librarian. And that kind of hate has no place in the 3rd Congressional District.
And Katrina.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this question, and I want to thank the person who brought it forward, because it is important that we center LGBTQIA rights in any discussion about everyone having the freedom to be themselves and live with dignity in their communities. So I'm proud to not only have co-authored the full equality agenda in the state capitol, but it's exactly what I want to do in Congress. So I'm going to list a few of those bills, but I think first and foremost, what I want to say is this: I see you and I hear you, and I know how important it is to have champions and advocates in Congress when we have Republicans like Derek Van Orden attacking your identity and your well-being. So not only would I co-author the Equality Act in Congress, but I also think it's important to ban conversion therapy. This is a bill we have been working on the state level, and there's a bill on the federal level as well. It is extremely harmful, and we need to stand up against these practices. I also believe in fair and equal housing. And so the Equality Act will help with non-discrimination in housing and employment, education, and access to public spaces, but there's separate bills specifically regarding fair and equal housing. In addition, I think we need to prohibit discrimination based on gender identity. And I've not only co-authored a bill such as that in the state legislature, but I will continue to advocate for that in Congress because these issues are personal. I have constituents in the Stevens Point area who met with me privately 2 years ago to let me know several families were looking at leaving because of the attacks in the state capitol by Republicans on our kids and because of who they are. And that is not okay. And as a member of the committee that heard these bills, I was there with them every step of the way and will continue to do so in Congress, because it isn't just about voting the right way. It's about meeting with your constituents and really representing their needs and interests and standing up to the bullies in the Capitol, whether it's Derek Van Orden in Congress or otherwise. And I think if you look at Project 2025 and the attack on the trans community and the LGBTQIA community, it is clear that they have a radical agenda to take away our rights and freedoms.
Thank you much. The next set of question will be begun by Rebecca about technology, and that has, with the expanding role of technology in our lives, should Congress play a role in regulation of new technology, such as social media, artificial intelligence, and others? And how would you expand access to broadband in the 3rd Congressional District?
I'm proud to serve on the Wisconsin Technology Council, and this is something that we talk about often. Right now, a lot of this is being decided at the state level, and we need to have a federal conversation around this to put some guardrails on AI and that type of new technology regulation. Because we've seen it to be a threat to our democracy when you look back at the 2016 election, and there's so much more that we have to do in order to regulate that. When it comes to expanding access to broadband in the 3rd CD, there's been a lot of federal funding that's come down to the state level, but everybody is operating in a really siloed basis, right? And a lot of that gets stuck in Madison. So we need to be having open lines of communication with both our state lawmakers and our federal lawmakers that this is actually being deployed into communities. And then it's not just Starlink and some of these other new technologies, but they're laying fiber that we know is the most effective way for folks to be connected within their communities. When I was a part of the WEDC board, the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, I helped serve in kicking off a broadband connectors pilot that really helped communities that were applying for grants at the state level with technical assistance. So they might not have a grant writer on staff in a small municipality, but if they could get that technical assistance, they get access to that grant. So I'm open to innovative things that work to get those dollars, not just to the largest communities in our district, but also a lot of the smallest communities that need them the most.
Katrina?
I'm going to start with broadband because this is a really important subject. I want to start by saying that Derek Van Orden and Republicans in Congress let the Affordable Connectivity Program and Internet Discount Program for seniors and working families expire in May, and hundreds of thousands of people relied on that to affordably get access to broadband. So that's wrong. And I wrote a letter to all of our members of Congress asking them to lead on continuing it. In addition, I've written a number of letters for communities applying for broadband grants and have been championing that in the legislature. There is a lot of federal money coming in, and it needs to be planned well and equitably so that the last mile in those super rural districts and areas actually get access. I introduced a bill specifically called Fiber to Farms because there's too many farmers, especially in the 3rd, but across the state, that do not have access yet to reliable broadband, and they need it for technology. Now on to AI, artificial intelligence. I support consumer protections and guardrails specifically for artificial intelligence, and co-sponsored a bill that would actually require disclosures of AI in campaign campaigns and elections. We need a federal task force on this, just like Governor Tony Evers started, and I'm committed to doing and working on that. I also support regulating and creating a level playing field as it relates to crypto and digital assets and ensuring consumer protection with privacy safeguards. Congress has a lot of work to do to catch up to new and emerging technology. And I fear that whether it's AI or social media, if we aren't convening conversations that center workers and consumers, we are letting corporations get ahead of the people.
Thank you. And Eric.
Like I've said, internet is an essential. It's just like electricity. It is absolutely necessary for everyone to have access to it. I'm the only one here that has IT professional experience. That is huge as we are moving into the next phase of development for a lot of these technologies. We need someone that actually understands what's happening in the databases of artificial intelligence. We need someone that actually understands how Facebook is targeting and how corporations are using our personal data to target and influence our decisions. We need someone that has an understanding of cryptocurrency and how that impacts our financial markets. We need someone that can actually have the conversations with big corporations that are coming in with their fancy lobbyists and lawyers and trying to persuade people. I can call their BS because I've been in the industry. And so as we're moving forward, World War III will not be bullets. It will be technology. It will be cyber attacks. One thing we need to be considering is our electric infrastructure and making sure that we are updating it accordingly and that we are all protected. These are the types of things that I have the background and the understanding to address and make sure that we are all protected. Technology, if it isn't implemented correctly, is a very dangerous thing. And that's what we're moving into. That's what we're seeing. So it's not just about access. It's about making sure that we are developing the future in a responsible way.
Thank you. Our next category will deal with education. And the question is, what role, and this is for Katrina to begin, what role should the federal government play in expanding access to high quality K through 12 education and beyond? Should the federal government play a role in student debt relief?
I think the federal government needs to play a role in childcare, to pre-K through 12 public schools, to apprenticeships, technical colleges, and public universities, because access is incredibly important across the third and across Wisconsin. And education is the cornerstone of our democracy and strengthens our economy and gives people bright futures and opportunities. I think first and foremost, we have a childcare crisis and a childcare desert across many parts of the state, and we need to be doing more on both the state and federal level to marshal resources to our childcare providers, because early childhood education is education that the federal government needs to be investing in the same way that we need to do more for our K-12 public schools. If we funded IDEA, we'd have $1 billion more in our Wisconsin public schools. We could lower property taxes instead of raise them, and we could give teachers a raise. And in addition to that, if we funded our universities and our technical colleges on the federal level, which flows to the state level, like we should, we wouldn't have Richland Center, for example, closing its doors and not being able to serve the most rural folks in Southwest Wisconsin. So when it comes to access, we need to be doing more with both state and federal funds, but we also need leaders who intimately are aware and understand higher education. And I'm a higher education leader who's introduced bills to fund our financial aid and expand it, and even help with student loan debt. Just this session, I co-sponsored a bill that would provide, if there were student loan forgiveness in Wisconsin, you wouldn't have to pay taxes on it. And I think that's important because a lot of people wouldn't be able to pay that bill. In the same way that I co-sponsored a bill, higher ed lower debt, to allow people with student loans to refinance their student loans. So I think when it comes to the federal government's role in public education, I believe It's a great responsibility because it's the primary funder of key programs like IDEA, which ensures our kids with special needs get the support that they have a right to. And that's why, as a leader in public education at all levels, I've been endorsed by both of the teachers unions in the state, AFT Wisconsin and WEAC, and I'm proud to be a public education champion.
Thank you. And Eric,
I believe public education actually starts with paid family leave. I support the Family Act, which would provide up to 12 weeks of paid leave so families can bond and grow without fear of financial ruin. Dogs actually have better rights in this regards than we do. We're not allowed to take puppies away for 8 weeks, but we expect people to go back to work a week after having a child. That's ridiculous. I am the only one here that supports student loan forgiveness. Why? Because it will add $1 trillion to our economy over the next 10 years. It allows people to buy houses. It allows people to buy cars. It puts money back into our economy. And it's the right thing to do. Education is the cornerstone of our future. You shouldn't be charged to learn. I'm the only one that supports free college tuition, inclusive of trade schools, 2 years, 2-year, 4-year. Public education should be free. Because again, it's an investment in our future. We have a predatory system right now with student loans. There are people that have been paying on their loans for decades and have not paid a single dollar of principal. Again, ridiculous. My plan will make sure that we are investing in the future and making sure that young people will get out in November, because we have to systematically fix our education system. If we can cancel PPP loans for the wealthy, we can cancel student debt. It's also making sure that we are investing in our teachers and our K through 12 systems. They don't have the resources to continue on. We are seeing referendum after referendum. I will make sure that they have money from a federal perspective so that everyone gets an education.
thank you. And Rebecca.
I am a proud product of Eau Claire Public Schools. I'm a Sherman Star. I'm a DeLong Knight. I'm a North Husky. And we need to do all that we can to fully fund and staff our public schools. I've talked at length with my sister who works for the Teachers Union in Minnesota about teacher retention and attraction. Teachers are overworked and underpaid. I'd like to see work study pay teachers when they're student teaching and have tuition waivers so teachers aren't paying for schooling when they're not actually taking classes. And when it comes to funding our schools, I want funding formulas to go up by at least the rate of inflation. I'm in favor of potentially expanding ESSER funds and more federal funding for full service community schools, which are a proven way to improve the achievement gap. I myself went through college with the help of Pell Grants and work study, and I want to expand Pell Grants for middle and low income families. I want to push for more alternative paths to the middle class, like technical college education, all of us being here today at CBTC, and looking at those paths as paths of dignity. People like Derek Van Orden, far-right Republicans like him, they wanted to slash our public education. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running to take him on.
Thank you very much. And now I'm going to make a confession to the crowd. The candidates were given 1 hour advance notice of the 9 questions that they have been asked and beautifully answered. However, we do have time, and I think it is important to hear impromptu answers from some very well-known questions that have been circulating in the newspapers and the news media for weeks, months, for years. And we'll start with Eric on this one. And it has to deal with immigration. Anyone heard of immigration? What should we do about the immigration issues, especially DACA, the Deferred Action of Childhood Arrivals? Immigration.
The reality is we need immigration. We do not have enough people to work in hospitality, to work in agriculture, to work in other industries. We need people. And so we need to make a system that actually works. Our immigration system is broken. It takes far too long, it's far too complicated, and it's part of what is causing the issues on the southern border, which is something we hear about. I also believe that we can do it in a humane way. We should not be putting people in camps. We should not be creating humanitarian crises. I support getting rid of ICE and making sure that everyone that wants to come to America and have opportunity can.
Thank you. And Rebecca, immigration.
So for years, our country has taken a patchwork approach to immigration reform, and we need comprehensive immigration reform now. We need to secure the border, while also ensuring that people that are here in our own country paying into our system are no longer living in the shadows, right? I think about our district, and I like to talk about immigration and relating it here to the 3rd Congressional District. We have a lot of farm workers down in the Arcadia area, right? And factory workers who are paying into a system in which they're not receiving any benefits. And you have somebody like Derek Van Orden, who is really demonizing our neighbors. And we've had opportunities, bipartisan opportunities, to pass a bill in which the far right radicals in Congress hijacked so that President Trump could run on that very issue. So we need people that are going to be able to work across the aisle on this issue to get things done, and not make it something that's part of political gamesmanship. And that's exactly what the far right has done. We need people that are going to work to deliver for working families throughout our district.
Thank you. And Katrina.
Thank you so much. My dad's an immigrant. He naturalized at the La Crosse County Circuit Court just about 3 decades ago. And in that time, we have not gotten any bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform in this country, even though there have been clear demands for it. Now, just last week, I was on East Hill and I was chatting with folks from Eau Claire telling me about immigration. One of them let me know it took her family 14 years to complete the citizenship process and naturalize. And this person works at UW Eau Claire, and this person contributes to the economy and is teaching and leading another generation of young people. And so there is more that we need to do, not just with comprehensive immigration reform, but I support a pathway to citizenship that is fair and equitable. And I know that when it comes to this conversation, Republicans spiked the football. They listened to their leader, Trump. Derek Van Orden was one of them. He refused to sit down at the table, compromise, or negotiate on clear solutions. And that's wrong because the majority of folks, especially here in the 3rd, want comprehensive immigration reform. And I think it's especially important that we have leaders with the experience to deliver, who have worked across the aisle before to get things done, especially on key issues that people like Derek Van Orden have played politics with. When it comes time for me to take a key vote on an issue as big as this one, you can count on me to be sitting down with our dairy farmers and our dairy workers, with our workforce development experts and leaders and our immigration leaders to talk about things like modernizing our H-2A visa system and providing more support and resources, not only at the border, but to ensure that we're actually processing these applications in a fair and timely way. That is just common sense. And that's why I'm running for Congress. We don't have enough common sense in Congress. And when Republicans are spiking the football on a key issue like this one, we know it's time for experienced leaders who have delivered before to step up and lead again. And that's my promise to you if I become your member of Congress.
Thank you very much. The second impromptu question deals with a issue all of these candidates and every candidate for any state office or federal office deals with, and that's they need money to run a campaign. So my question, we'll start with Becca's answer, is do we need and how would you create new campaign finance laws?
Thanks for this question. So you don't see a lot of folks like me running for Congress. You see a lot of people usually that are wealthy or are elitists or a little bit out of touch with working class folks maybe. And it's because the number one thing that people look at when they're working to recruit candidates to run for Congress is how much money can you raise? And I think it's so important that we change our campaign finance laws so that there's more people with my type of background stepping up to run for offices at this level. I know I don't have a background in politics, being a career politician, but I do have a background, I think, that's really rooted in my community that I think connects with everyday folks in this district. Growing up on a dairy farm, running a small business for a number of years, running a nonprofit organization, and waitressing 3 nights a week. And I think there's value and dignity in that type of work that's translatable at the highest level of office, or at the highest level of office, but to Congress.
Katrina?
We need to end corruption and restore public integrity. And for too long, especially since Citizens United became a decision, unfortunately, that declared that money is speech and corporations are people, we have seen the capture of politicians who take corporate PAC money and do the bidding of the corporate lobbyists. And this is why we have artificially inflated prescription drug costs and healthcare costs. So if we truly want to enact some of the reforms we discussed tonight, we need to end Citizens United. And I'll be a Democracy for All amendment co-sponsor, which will overturn that decision. But in the Capitol, I've also co-sponsored bills to enact public financing of some elections because I know that some candidates can't and shouldn't spend 8 to 10 hours of their day calling people, especially people out of state and outside of their district, for money, when instead they could be working on behalf of the average person in their district. And so that's why I'm proud to be endorsed by End Citizens United. And I was really proud in our last forum when I presented my friends here in the Democratic primary with the opportunity to sign the no corporate PAC pledge that they did too. In addition, we need to pass the Anti-Corruption and Public Integrity Act. I know some Supreme Court justices who should definitely be following ethics laws. We need to close the revolving door. We need to reform lobbying rules. Not only do we need a judicial integrity, but we need to make it easier for folks to run for office at any level and make it easier for folks to vote. So strengthening voting rights is a key component to this, because the more voters who are participating in civil society and in our government, the better chance we have of recruiting more candidates who are going to be speaking the language of the average person in their district. When it comes to campaign finance reform, this is something that I've seen up close and in person in the state capitol, but there's tens of thousands of lobbyists in DC. And that's why I made sure when I chose to run for Congress to sit down with End Citizens United and talk about how we can get rid of the pernicious corporate influence on our politics and our democracy. And I want to point out, Derek Van Orden is bought and paid for by big special interests. So we need someone bold enough and brave enough to stand up to him and really lead on this issue.
Thank you. And Eric?
So I actually started my campaign with a pledge to not take any corporate PAC money when I launched in October. From the beginning, because this is important. You shouldn't be able to buy an election. I also support ending Citizens United. It's also going a step further, and it's banning Congress people from trading stocks and making money off of the decisions that they are making. It's enforcing the laws against gerrymandering. We should have fair elections, as we know very well here in Wisconsin. Our elections should be free and have undue influence. Like I said, you shouldn't be able to buy an election, and that's currently how our system is working. You win, in theory, by raising the most money, not having the ideas that speak most to people and standing with the people. I'm proud to have 99% of my donations be from individuals. I am truly running a grassroots campaign and have an average donation of $27. You can't buy me. But it's important because we have to show that it's possible to run a successful campaign on the message, not the money.
Thank you. The third and final impromptu, so each of them will have opportunity to be the first to respond to an impromptu question. This isn't maybe one that's well known, but it's one each and every person in this room has to be aware of. We need an answer. Because the reason for this forum tonight is to find the best replacement for our current representation. All of you are so very much better candidates than our current congressman. The question we have before we allow their final 2-minute slots for closing arguments that I wish to ask them. Will you endorse the winner of this primary, as well as direct your volunteers to continue working for the Democrat who wins? And will you, to the best of your abilities, financially support the candidate to ensure we have a Democrat as our next congressperson? Katrina, we start with you.
Thank you so much for this question, Phil, and thank you for your leadership. Absolutely. I am a Democrat and I'm proud to be a Democrat. I'm proud to have supported dozens and dozens of candidates across Wisconsin. I've knocked doors for people in swing districts, not only in the 3rd, but across our state, and I'm going to continue to, regardless of how the primary shakes out. Of course, I want the opportunity to earn your vote, and I hope I can count on it. But should the primary not go my way, I pledge and promise that I will be supporting the Democratic nominee because Derek Van Orden is one of the most extreme members of Congress, and we get one chance at taking him on and defeating him. We all know the stakes of this race. We know what's on the line. It's abortion rights and reproductive freedom, healthcare, public education, clean water, infrastructure, union rights, and democracy. Democracy is on the line. And so I actually approached my colleagues, the candidates here, a few months ago, I would say now, asking, if we're going to do a unity pledge, which I was happy to say yes to, can we also pledge 40 hours of call time, 40 hours of making calls to our supporters on behalf of the candidates? Events across the district, doors and phone calls. And I initiated that because I know how important this race is. The path to the White House, the 3rd Congressional District, leading to the House majority, and the path to the U.S. Senate runs through the 3rd Congressional District. We should be proud, we should work hard, and we should work together. And so I appreciate the call for unity because there is nothing more important to the future of our country and our democracy than us uniting, not only as Democrats, but as independents who care about democracy and freedom, who want to make sure we protect our democracy and fight like mad for it. It's going to take every single one of us. So I really appreciate the call to action because that's exactly what all of us have to do to make sure we don't just win in November, but it's really about enacting reforms that strengthen our democracy, voting rights, freedoms like abortion, and more. So I look forward to working with all of you on this vital initiative for our state and country.
Thank you, Eric. Will you support the winner?
Yes, absolutely. And I don't have any conditions to support the winner. Although I will have to go back to work. But that's a reality. That's a reality. Like, I have always committed that if it's not me, I will do everything that I can to make sure it's not Derek in November. But the reality is, I'm going to have to go back to work too.
I'm going to have to go back to work as well. But yeah, actually everybody up here has already made a unity pledge to one another that we will support whoever the nominee is. That's something I did last cycle. I ran for this seat last cycle and supported State Senator Brad Pfaff, hosted events, knocked doors, was vocal about getting behind him. And that's something that we all have to come together to do because at the end of the day, Derek Van Orden is who we're really running against. And he is not the right fit for us here in Western Wisconsin, both his demeanor in Congress, his values that he represents, and the policies that he supports. And so we're very united in that front. So
thank you very much. And now we will have closing comments from all three candidates, and we'll start with Eric.
Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Progressive change is the only thing that is going to win this race. This is not the year to be a moderate. Judge Janet won this district with 55% of the vote, running on abortion and fair maps. Tammy won this district with 56% of the vote. And everyone's favorite progressive, who was just here recently, Bernie, won with 62% of the vote. The reality is progressives win in the 3rd district. To flip Congress, to hold the Senate, to re-elect Joe Biden, it's going to take us all. This district has 6 universities, and we will need young people. It is 55,000 people. That means speaking to their issues, though. I'm the only Democrat in this race that has called for a ceasefire. I am the only one that is in support of the Green New Deal. I'm the only one that supports student loan forgiveness. I'm the only one that's called for a wealth tax. I'm the only one fighting for Medicare for all, which Democrats have been fighting for years, decades, before I was born. It is our winning issue. I am the one running to lead the next generation of Americans to a brighter future. With my background in IT, healthcare, and housing, I have the most experience to address the top issues that we have not only today, but tomorrow. We need to energize our base. And that means running on a platform that speaks to them. My positive vision has created a coalition of local elected support. From La Crosse, Platteville, Menominee, from Stevens Point. 5 of the 11 city council members of Stevens Point have endorsed me. And our progressive here, Jeremy Gregor, has as well. The 3rd CD is ready for progressive change. Not tomorrow, not next year, but today.
Thank you.
I look forward to your support.
Thank you. And Rebecca.
If there's one thing that I'm sure that all of us on the stage can agree on tonight, it's that Derek Van Orden has got to go. We have talked at length about how he is wrong for Wisconsin on policies and just plain embarrassing on everything else. I'm our best chance to defeat Derek Van Orden. What sets me apart are my lived experiences that are relatable to everyday voters here in the 3rd CD. So many of us have lost our farms. So many of us struggle to pay our healthcare bills. So many of us have shuttered our small businesses, and so many of us are really living paycheck to paycheck. And when I'm out talking to people across the district, I hear the same stories. We know we can turn out Democratic voters around this district in the general, but it takes someone with a background like mine to connect with swing, independent, and moderate voters to find common ground. When the seat opened up last cycle, it felt like to me a real opportunity to step up and serve my community in a greater way. And now that it feels even more urgent. We won 11 out of 19 counties last cycle and lost by just 8% of the vote, despite being hugely outspent. We won in population centers like Eau Claire County and Portage County, but we also won in a lot of rural communities because our message resonated with working families across Western Wisconsin. The seat is one that won't be anointed, but it will be earned. That campaign allowed us to build the 19-county infrastructure it's going to take to deliver this district in November. It allowed me to build a profile and raise the resources that we're going to need to combat the flood of dark money in this race that the far right is going to dump in this district. And it showed that we have a message that works and resonates, a working class message, not of a career politician. I know we can flip this seat back to blue, and I'm asking for your support August 13th. I'm going to need your help knocking doors, even if it's down a dirt road, writing postcards, having tough conversations, but ones that I know can break through. Together, I know that we can mend the division in our country and in this district, but it takes a homegrown leader like myself to get us there. Thank you.
Thank you. And Katrina.
Thank you so much. I first ran for office because I knew that my community needed a voice and they deserve someone who's going to deliver for them. And that's exactly what I've done over 12 years in the legislature. And now I'm running for Congress to defeat radical Derek Van Orden because we get one clear shot at not only defending our democracy and reproductive freedoms, but also taking out one of the most extreme members of Congress. And you've heard from 3 candidates here tonight, and I think it was a great discussion. Here's the difference in this race. I'm the only Democrat here who's held public office and who has experience passing bills into law. And I think that's important. I'm also the only Democrat here who's ever won a tough election in a tough district. and I outperformed other Democrats. In 2022, I was the Democrat in Portage County who got the most votes. So while Governor Evers won the third, I outperformed him in my district. That shows that I can reach across the aisle and find independents who care about democracy and freedom to vote for me. And I have a track record of doing that. In fact, I'm the only Democrat here tonight who has the experience defeating a Republican. I know what it takes to defeat a Republican at the ballot box, and I know how important it is. When Republicans targeted me, I won by double digits, and I won by building a coalition, which is exactly what we're doing now. We have elected officials and grassroots activists who've endorsed my campaign from all over the 3rd Congressional District, and I'm incredibly proud of our winning coalition, from End Citizens United, who's endorsed me, to 17 unions, to our local Eau Claire legislators, Jeff Smith and Jody Emerson, to Steve Doyle and Jill Billings and La Crosse, and my own community members, including the mayor and county supervisors. So I think it's important that we have a candidate with the experience to deliver on key issues like public education, abortion, democracy, and reforms like lowering prescription drug costs and healthcare when it comes time to stand in the halls of Congress and take those key votes and pass those key initiatives into law, because our democracy is hanging by a thread. And Derek Van Orden has been part of unraveling it. We need someone who can stand up to him boldly and bravely to not only take him to task and hold him publicly accountable, but to win. So I ask for your vote on or before August 13th. Thank you.
Before I share a brief closing statement, how about we show our appreciation to all three of these candidates? Thank you, thank you. And I've been informed it's remarkable. I told them we needed a room with 80 to 100. They give us a room with 120, and that wasn't enough. Over 130 of you here. That's absolutely remarkable. But I started this process back in February because I chose this date for a reason, because exactly 4 weeks from today, on August 13th at 8 p.m. at this time, the primary polls will be closing. And when that happens, do not have any regrets. Do not regret that you did not vote. Do not regret that you didn't get someone else to vote. And do not regret that you did not campaign a little more for a candidate you support. And do not regret that you could have given just a few more dollars to your favorite candidate. Do not have any regrets. Exercise your rights to help elect the candidates that align with your philosophy. And thank God we live in America, where the power of the cast vote is still the most powerful tool we have. Thank you all again so very much for coming, and let's hear it for them. Thank you.